3,000 years ago, a global superhighway crossed the oceans. Ancient civilizations built a maritime network of astonishing scale and sophistication, long before satellites or steel ships. This story is etched not in textbooks, but in forgotten harbor walls and sunken docks waiting to be understood. By the end, you will see the deep roots of our connected world and gain a completely new perspective on human history. How did a port in India service merchants from Mesopotamia? What secret logistics fed the pyramids of Giza? We are about to trace the silent blueprints of the first globalization. What do you believe is the most enduring legacy of our ancient ancestors? That superhighway required more than just ships and sailors. To grasp its true scale, we must first understand the network itself. An ancient maritime network was not merely a line on a map from point A to point B. It was a vast, breathing organism, a complex system woven from three critical threads. The first thread was the physical infrastructure, the bones of the system. These are the harbors we can still see, the breakwaters, the warehouses, and the docks that sheltered ships and stored cargo. The second thread was the social and political framework, the muscles that made it move. This included trade treaties between distant kings, shared languages of commerce, and the families of merchants who passed knowledge down through generations. The third thread was the environmental intelligence, the system's nervous system. This was the deep, hard-won understanding of monsoon winds, ocean currents, and seasonal stars that turned a terrifying, open sea into a predictable highway. When these three threads intertwined, something extraordinary happened. Goods began to flow, not as occasional accidents, but as a constant, reliable pulse. Spices from the Moluccas could find their way to a dining table in Rome. Mesopotamian bronze could be fashioned into art in the Indus Valley. But this network traded far more than material things. A ship carried more than its cargo. It carried the blueprint for a new way to build a hull hidden in the mind of its shipwright. It carried the seeds of religious ideas discussed between a trader and a local priest on a moonlit dock. It carried artistic styles, musical instruments, and even culinary recipes. In this way, the ancient maritime network functioned much like our internet does today. The dockyards and harbors were not just parking lots for boats. They were the vital servers and data centers of the ancient world. They were where raw materials were processed, where information was exchanged, and where connections were forged that would irrevocably shape languages, laws, and entire cultures. To walk among their ruins is to stand in the router room of early human civilization. The blueprint for this entire system may have been drawn over 4,000 years ago. In the dry earth of present-day Gujarat, India, lies the ghost of a harbor that changed everything. This is Lothal, a city of the ancient Indus Valley civilization, flourishing around 2,400 years before the Common Era. To stand there today is to witness the birth of maritime engineering. The centerpiece is a massive, rectangular basin, neatly carved from the landscape. But this was no simple pond. Archaeologists studying the site realized it was connected to the nearby river by a long channel. And at the mouth of that channel, they found evidence of a wooden gate. This was the genius of Lothal. It was the world's first known tidal dock. The engineers of Lothal understood the rhythm of the sea. They knew the water level in their river would rise and fall with the tides. So they built a lock gate. When the high tide rushed in, they could open the gate and let the deep water flood into their man-made basin. Ships would sail in on that crest of water. Then the gate could be closed, trapping the high water inside the dock. This meant that ships could be loaded, unloaded, and repaired in a stable, deep pool, completely unaffected by the low tide outside. It was a perpetual, guaranteed parking space for the merchant fleets of the Bronze Age. Think of the confidence this system inspired. A captain from a distant land could plan a voyage to Lothal knowing that upon arrival, regardless of the hour or the tide, a safe berth awaited. This reliability is the bedrock of any complex trade network, but Lothal was far more than just a parking lot. It was a humming economic engine. Excavations have uncovered entire workshops dedicated to a single precious product. Carnelian, a beautiful reddish gemstone, was brought here in raw lumps. At Lothal, master craftsmen drilled, polished, and shaped it into exquisite beads that were coveted across the ancient world. And how do we know those beads traveled? The proof is in the clay. Archaeologists have found Mesopotamian cylinder seals at Lothal. These are small, carved stone rollers used to stamp signatures onto documents or bales of goods. Their presence is a smoking gun. It means merchants or officials from Mesopotamia, a civilization centered in what is now Iraq, were physically present in this Indian dockyard, conducting business, signing contracts, and overseeing shipments. This tiny artifact is a tangible thread connecting two worlds separated by the vast Arabian Sea. The design of Lothal reveals a mind that saw the bigger picture. The dock was integrated into the city's layout, with warehouses and workshops built right up to its edge for maximum efficiency. This was not an afterthought. It was a master plan, evidence of a society that placed maritime trade at the very heart of its identity and prosperity. The engineers of Lothal were not just builders. They were the architects of connection, and their silent, water-filled dock became a loud declaration that the world was ready to do business. Yet the genius of Lothal was not an isolated spark. 1,000 years later and thousands of miles to the west, another civilization was building harbors on an even more monumental scale, driven not by merchants but by the will of a god-king. On the barren, windswept coast of the Red Sea in Egypt, the oldest known harbor in the world lay hidden for 45 centuries. This is Wadi Al-Jaf, a site so perfectly preserved it feels as if the workers just stepped away for a moment. Established around 2,600 years before the Common Era by the Pharaoh Khufu, the very ruler who would commission the Great Pyramid of Giza, this harbor was not a public marketplace. It was a tightly controlled, state-run logistics hub, a military-grade operation in stone and papyrus. The scale is immediately humbling. Long, straight stone jetties, built from massive limestone blocks, reach out into the water like skeletal fingers, creating protected channels for ships to moor. Behind them, carved directly into the living rock of the desert hills, are over 30 long, narrow storage galleries. These were the ancient equivalent of bonded warehouses, secure lockups where precious cargo could be stored safe from the elements and from prying eyes. Walking into one of these cool, dark chambers, you can still see the mason's chisel marks on the walls. This was infrastructure built to last for eternity, mirroring the pharaoh's own quest for immortality. But the true treasure of Wadi Al-Jaf was not in its stones, but in its paper. In 2011, archaeologists made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the historical community. They found hundreds of fragments of papyrus, the oldest ever discovered in Egypt. These were not religious texts or royal decrees. They were mundane administrative records, the filing cabinet of the ancient world. They list daily deliveries of food for the workers, accounts of tools, and most importantly, detailed logs of maritime expeditions. Some of these papyri were written by a man named Mura, an inspector and crew leader. His meticulous notes chronicle the movement of limestone blocks from quarries across the Nile to the pyramid construction site at Giza, but they also hint at the harbor's greater purpose. Wadi Al-Jaf was the launch point for royal expeditions sailing south along the Red Sea coast. Their mission was to secure critical resources that Egypt's own Nile Valley lacked. They sought copper from mines in the Sinai Peninsula, essential for making the tools that cut the pyramid stones. they sought turquoise, a vibrant blue-green stone cherished for jewelry and ceremonial objects. This harbor was the vital supply line for a national project of unimaginable ambition. It reveals a staggering level of centralized planning. The state organized everything, from baking the bread that fed the sailors to maintaining the ships and scheduling the tides. This was the pyramid's hidden blueprint, not for its construction but for its procurement. The pharaoh's divine authority was demonstrated not just by the silent, soaring monument at Giza, but by his power to command the sea, to marshal distant resources, and to document every loaf of bread and every block of stone in the process. Wadi Al-Jaf shows us that the ancient world's greatest wonders were, at their core, triumphs of logistics. They were made possible by networks of forgotten harbors where ordinary people like Mura, with their papyrus and their ledgers, quietly managed the flow of a kingdom. The pharaoh's ledgers reveal a world of top-down control, but what happens when the sea itself becomes a culture's beating heart? 1,000 miles northwest of Egypt, on the sun-drenched island of Crete, an entirely different maritime vision was taking shape. Here, the Minoan civilization did not just use the sea, they mastered it with an elegance that still feels modern. Their signature was not the solitary, state-run depot, but the vibrant, cosmopolitan port. And at the site of Commos, we find perhaps the clearest blueprint for this seafaring identity. Walk along the southern coast of Crete, and you will encounter a row of monumental stone structures that seem to grow from the earth itself. These are not temples or palaces. They are ship sheds, colossal garages carved directly into the gentle slope of the shoreline. Each one is a long, narrow hall, open to the sea, with a paved floor that slopes gently downward. This design was pure, practical genius. A Minoan galley, its hull sleek and painted, could be sailed or hauled directly into its own private, sheltered bay. Inside, protected from the punishing Mediterranean sun, and more importantly, from shipworms that could devour a wooden hull in a single season, crews could carry out repairs, repaint, and refit in perfect security. This was not mere shelter. It was preventative care for the very engines of their society, a permanent invitation for the next voyage. The artifacts scattered in the soil of Commos tell us exactly where those voyages went. In a single archaeological layer, you might find a clay jar from the palaces of Cyprus, still stained with aromatic oil. Next to it, a fragment of a fine Egyptian alabaster vase, likely a gift for a Minoan noble. And beside that, the distinctive painted pottery of the Levant, the coast of modern-day Lebanon and Syria. This was not a market that saw traders from one foreign place at a time. Commos was a constant, swirling intersection. It was the ancient equivalent of a major international airport terminal, where goods, people, and ideas from 3 continents were always in transit. The Minoans were not passive recipients of this flow. They actively curated it. Historians often call them the first thalassocracy, a word that means a power built on dominion over the sea. But their power was rarely expressed through conquest or military harbors. Instead, it flowed through what we might now call soft power. A Minoan trader did not arrive with an army. He arrived with beautiful pottery, exquisite textiles, and advanced metalwork that local elites desperately wanted. He brought architectural styles and artistic motifs that would soon be copied in foreign palaces. The harbor was his platform. Through trade, the Minoans projected an image of sophistication, wealth, and cultural prestige that made others want to connect with them, to emulate them, to be part of their network. This transforms our understanding of these ancient docks. At Commos, the ship sheds were more than garages. They were stages for cultural diplomacy. Each vessel pulled into its shed was a messenger, and its cargo was a language. The network here was not just moving spices and copper. It was broadcasting an entire way of life. The success of this system is written in the ruins across the Mediterranean. You can see Minoan-inspired frescoes in the homes of Egyptian nobles. You can find Minoan artistic techniques influencing craftsmen in Anatolia. The harbor complex at Komos was the amplifier for this cultural signal, proving that the most enduring empires are sometimes those built not on walls but on waves, and measured not in territory seized but in styles adopted and tastes transformed. This quiet corner of Crete shows us that the strongest links in a global network are often forged not by force but by fascination. But a fascination with beautiful goods was only one side of the ancient economy. For true commercial dominance, you needed a different kind of power, one built on engineering secrets and a ruthless grasp of supply and demand. On the Levantine coast, where modern-day Lebanon meets the sea, a people emerged who perfected this formula. They were the Phoenicians, and their greatest city, Tyre, became the ultimate nexus of the ancient world through a staggering act of will against the ocean itself. Tyre was originally built on a small, rocky island just off the mainland. Its greatest defense was also its greatest limitation, a lack of space for the safe harbors its merchant empire required. So the Phoenicians did the unthinkable. They decided to build their own coastline. Using immense quantities of stone, they constructed two massive, artificial harbors on the island's northern and southern sides, the Sidonian and the Egyptian ports. These were not simple piers. They were colossal breakwaters and quays built out into the open sea, creating deep water anchorages that were safe in any weather. They effectively turned their island fortress into a perfect, purpose-built maritime machine. The scale of this project is almost difficult to comprehend. It was an act of territorial creation, a declaration that if geography did not provide a perfect harbor, they would simply invent one. This engineering marvel turned Tyre into an unmatchable linchpin. A ship carrying tin from the distant mines of Cornwall in Britain could dock safely in its deep harbor. Another ship, laden with ivory and incense from the Persian Gulf, could do the same. In the warehouses between them, the legendary goods of Phoenicia were waiting. The most famous was Tyrian purple, a vibrant dye so color-fast and brilliant it became synonymous with royalty across the ancient world. Producing it was a vile, industrial process, requiring the harvesting of thousands of murex sea snails. The dye works of Tyre must have been a place of overwhelming odor, but the end product was worth its weight in silver. Then there was the cedar wood of Lebanon, tall, straight, and fragrant, prized by every civilization from Egypt to Mesopotamia for building temples, palaces, and ships. The Phoenicians did not just trade these goods, they controlled them at the source, and their harbors were the only authorized export terminals. This was a monopoly enforced not just by treaty, but by technology. Their harbor construction relied on a trade secret as valuable as any dye, a special hydraulic concrete that could set and harden underwater. This allowed them to build permanent, durable structures in the chaotic tidal zone, a technical advantage others could not replicate. Their ports were literally unbreakable fortresses of commerce. Think of the strategic genius at work here. By creating the safest, most advanced ports in the Mediterranean, they made themselves the indispensable middlemen. Every merchant from every land had to come to Tyre. They had to pay docking fees, hire local pilots, and navigate Phoenician mercantile law. The harbor was the bottleneck through which all wealth flowed, and the Phoenicians owned the bottleneck. This technological edge in port construction directly enabled their commercial empire. It illustrates a profound truth about ancient networks, that control over the point of connection was often more valuable than control over the territory. The Phoenicians understood that the node was more powerful than the route. Their legacy is not a vast inland empire of stone steels and conquered cities. It is a scattering of harbor ruins from Cyprus to Carthage, all built with the same ruthless, practical logic. In the silent, submerged blocks of Tyre's artificial islands, we see the cold, brilliant calculus of ancient globalization, where trade secrets were poured into concrete, and the mastery of a harbor wall could command the loyalty of kings across the known world. That mastery of the bottleneck reached its ultimate expression in the hands of history's most famous empire. While the Phoenicians controlled trade through brilliant engineering, Rome sought something far grander: total integration. Their answer was not just a harbor, but a machine built on the scale of a city. 2 days' sail north of Tyre, at the mouth of the Tiber River, lies the skeleton of that machine, the imperial port of Portus. Conceived by Emperor Claudius and perfected by Emperor Trajan, this was not a place that grew organically from trade. It was willed into existence by imperial decree, a colossal artificial harbor with a single, overwhelming purpose: to feed Rome. Picture a landscape utterly transformed. Where there was once an unstable coastline and a river mouth prone to silting, Roman engineers carved out a vast, protected basin from the sea itself. They built a breakwater over a kilometer long, anchored by a monumental lighthouse that rivaled the one at Alexandria, but the true genius lay inland. Emperor Trajan added a second, inner harbor, a perfect hexagonal basin connected by canals to the Tiber River and the older port of Ostia. This hexagonal shape was not for aesthetics. It was for pure, ruthless efficiency. Every side of the hexagon was a quay, maximizing the linear dock space where grain freighters, the massive cargo ships of the ancient world, could tie up and unload. This geometric precision reveals the Roman mind, a system where every angle served a function. The scale of the operation is still staggering to walk through today. Towering above the docks were the horia, the imperial warehouses. These were not simple sheds. They were multi-story, fireproof storage complexes with raised floors to keep grain dry and secure. At Portus, the horia were the empire's granary. Each year, a fleet of specially designed ships, the navicularii, would arrive from the provinces, primarily Egypt and North Africa. Their holds were packed with millions of measures of wheat, the annona, the grain dole that fed the free population of Rome. The arrival of this fleet was not just a commercial event. It was the single most important logistical operation for the empire's political stability. An empty grain dole meant riots in the streets. Portus was the guarantee that would never happen. It functioned as the central processing unit of the entire Mediterranean maritime network. Customs officials standardized tariffs and inspections. Dock workers, organized into guilds, moved cargo with practiced rhythm. The grain was transferred from deep draft sea-going freighters onto smaller river barges for the final journey up the Tiber to Rome's warehouses. Every step was regulated, documented, and optimized. Portus did not just receive goods, it imposed order. By building this single, colossal gateway, Rome could monitor and control the flow of resources from its richest provinces. Provincial ports from Alexandria to Carthage were no longer independent trading hubs. They became standardized feeders in a vast, empire-wide system, all designed to fill the hexagonal basin at Portus. This was globalization as administration. The harbor's quiet, geometric perfection speaks of a power so confident it could reshape the very coast to serve its needs, turning the chaotic sea into a predictable, managed pipeline straight to the heart of the empire. But even Rome's hexagonal perfection had its limits, a horizon beyond which its direct control could not reach. Yet the network extended far further, drawn eastward by a single, irresistible treasure. On the lush, humid Malabar coast of India, the air itself carried the scent of wealth, the sharp, pungent aroma of black pepper. This was the realm of Muziris, a port so legendary its very existence was debated for centuries, whispered about in Roman merchant manuals and sung of in ancient Tamil poetry. It was the elusive eastern terminus of the known world, the place where the Roman maritime network met the vast monsoonal heartbeat of the Indian Ocean. For generations, Muziris was a ghost, a name on a faded papyrus or a tantalizing reference in a classical text. Then, at a site called Patanom, the earth began to give up its secrets. Archaeologists sifting through the soil uncovered a stunning mosaic of connection. They found the distinctive, long-bodied amphorae, the ceramic shipping containers of the Roman world, still stained with the residue of wine and olive oil from Mediterranean vineyards and groves. Lying beside them were fine, polished black pottery from local Indian workshops and delicate glassware that likely originated in the workshops of West Asia. This was not a layer of Roman goods or a layer of Indian goods. It was a single, inseparable stratum of global exchange, a physical testament to a harbor that did not just host foreign traders, but wove their lives and goods into the very fabric of the city. Muziris was more than a market. It was a true crossroads, the pivot point in an annual dance governed not by emperors, but by the wind. The entire Indian Ocean network operated on a monsoonal rhythm, a predictable, seasonal pulse that made long-distance travel not a reckless gamble, but a planned commercial event. For half the year, the winds blew steadily from the southwest, pushing ships from the Arabian Peninsula and the Red Sea directly toward the Indian coast. Traders would arrive at Muziris, their ships laden with gold coins, fine glass, and wine. They would spend months ashore, negotiating with local merchants for the mountains of black pepper, precious gems, and silks that filled the warehouses. Then, as the seasons shifted, the winds would reverse, blowing just as reliably from the northeast. The same ships, now heavy with the riches of the east, would raise their sails and be carried home as if on a scheduled return voyage. This created a rhythm of commerce as reliable as the harvest, a cyclical exchange that linked the dining tables of Roman patricians with the pepper vines of Kerala. The existence of Muziris reveals a network of stunning sophistication and mutual dependency. The Roman Empire, for all its military might, could not conquer the monsoon. Instead, it had to synchronize with it. Roman merchants did not rule in Muziris. They partnered, they bargained, and they waited. Tamil poems from the era describe the bustling port, with its handsome houses and warehouses full of sacks of pepper, where the sound of gold coins mingled with many languages. This was a partnership of equals in commerce, if not in empire. The loss of Muziris, which faded from history likely due to a catastrophic shift in its river channel, was not just the loss of a port. It was the severing of a direct, living link between two worlds. Its rediscovery at Patanom is a powerful reminder that the most vital nodes in a global network are often those built on seasonal trust and cyclical return, places where the world gathered not under the banner of a single power, but under the shared sail of the wind. The monsoon winds that filled the sails for Muziris also carried traders further east, into the labyrinth of islands and deltas that is Southeast Asia. Here, far from the centralized empires of Rome or Persia, a different kind of maritime power emerged, one built not on conquest, but on the clever manipulation of water and geography. In the vast, fertile Mekong Delta, the Kingdom of Funan created a port that defies our traditional image of a harbor. This was Ok-Io, a city where the streets were made of water. From roughly the 1st to the 7th century of the Common Era, Ok-Io was less a city built beside a port, and more a port that had grown into a city. Archaeologists mapping the site have revealed a stunning urban plan, a grid of land and liquid. Wide, straight canals were dug in precise parallels, intersecting at right angles to form long, rectangular city blocks. These were not mere drainage ditches. They were aquatic highways deep enough for trading vessels to sail directly from the South China Sea, through a network of natural rivers, and right into the commercial heart of the town. A merchant could dock his boat at the foot of a warehouse, unload his cargo, and have it stored within steps of the water's edge. This was a hydraulic machine for trade, a city engineered from the ground up to minimize friction in the movement of goods. The genius of Ok-Io was its position. It sat like a spider at the center of a web, linking two colossal spheres of commerce. To its west lay the Indian Ocean world with its Roman gold and Persian merchants. To its north and east lay the South China Sea and the rising influence of China. Archaeology positioned itself as the essential middle ground, the one place where goods from these vastly different systems could reliably meet. The proof is in the soil. Excavations have yielded Roman medallions from the reign of Antoninus Pius, gold coins that journeyed an almost unimaginable distance. They have uncovered intricately carved seals from Persia and fine bronze mirrors from Han Dynasty China. But Archaeology was not just a passive mailbox where these treasures were dropped off. It was a vibrant, humming processing center, a true entrepot. Local artisans took raw materials arriving from afar and transformed them. They might recast foreign metals into regional styles of jewelry, or carve local woods and resins into forms that would appeal to the next trader in the chain. The city thrived on value-added exchange. This role as facilitator fostered something extraordinary, a uniquely hybrid culture. The people of Archaeology adopted and adapted foreign ideas to create something new. They blended Hindu and Buddhist religious concepts arriving from India with indigenous spiritual beliefs. Their art and architecture show a fusion of styles, creating aesthetic forms found nowhere else on Earth. Their power was not measured in the size of their army, but in the breadth of their connections and the sophistication of their synthesis. Archaeology demonstrates that the most influential nodes in a global network are sometimes the translators, the places that specialize not in producing a single commodity, but in understanding the needs of many different worlds and finding ways to connect them. When the canals of Archaeology finally silted up and the city faded back into the jungle, it left behind a powerful idea that cultural vitality and economic power can flow from being a bridge, not a fortress. While the water streets of Archaeology translated cultures, another port was forging a kingdom's very identity from the riches of a continent. On the arid shores of the Red Sea, where the African continent meets the saltwater highway, the stone ruins of Adulis whisper of a power that turned its back to the land to face the world. This was the maritime gateway for the kingdom of Axum, a civilization whose heart lay in the highlands of modern-day Ethiopia, yet whose reach was defined by its control of the coast. Adulis was the vital lung through which Axum breathed, transforming the inland kingdom into an international superpower. Imagine the scene along its wharves. Towering piles of elephant tusks, the precious ivory hunted deep in the African interior, awaited shipment. Skins of exotic animals, perhaps leopards or lions destined for imperial menageries, were bundled and tagged. Gold, mined from forgotten rivers, gleamed in the sun. These treasures of the continent were hauled down from the highlands on caravans, converging at Adulis to be loaded onto ships bound for Rome, for Byzantium, and for ports across the Indian Ocean. In return, those ships disgorged fine linen and woolen textiles from Egypt, glassware from Syria, and amphorae brimming with olive oil and wine from the Mediterranean. The harbor was a constant exchange, a transfer of weight, where the heavy, organic wealth of Africa was traded for the manufactured luxuries of the wider world. But Adulis traded in something far more transformative than goods. It was here that new ideas stepped ashore. In the early 4th century, a ship likely docked at Adulis carrying a young Syrian philosopher named Frumentius. After a period of service in the Axumite royal court, he would travel back through this same port to Alexandria, returning consecrated as the first bishop of Axum. Through Adulis, the theology and liturgy of Christianity sailed into the Horn of Africa, where it would take root and eventually become the state religion of the kingdom. The harbor was not just a commercial gate, it was a spiritual portal. This flow of faith underscores the port's deeper role as a diplomatic and cultural interface. Ambassadors from the Byzantine Empire would arrive here, their vessels a statement of political alliance. Traders from southern Arabia would negotiate in its warehouses, bringing not only goods but linguistic and artistic influences that would subtly shape Axumite art and architecture. The prosperity flowing through Adulis funded the kingdom's most iconic achievements, the great stone obelisks of its capital city, symbols of authority that proclaimed Axum's place among the empires of the world. The story of Adulis reveals a profound truth about ancient networks. A kingdom did not need to be coastal to be a maritime power. It simply needed to control the point where the land met the sea. By mastering Adulis, the inland rulers of Axum effectively shortened the distance between their highland resources and the global market. They leveraged their geographic position, acting as the indispensable conduit for everything that moved between the African interior and the maritime web. Their prominence was not born from a vast navy, but from the strategic possession of a single, superb harbor. When the port of Adulis eventually declined, succumbing to silting or shifts in trade routes, it was not just a city that faded. It was a connection severed, a kingdom's window to the world slowly closing. The silent columns and foundation stones lying on the Eritrean coast today are monuments to a simple, powerful formula that in the ancient world, control of a harbor could elevate a kingdom from regional ruler to global player, turning the whispers of the interior into a voice that empires across the sea could not ignore. The story of the sea is not only written in sun-baked stone and tropical silt. Follow the cold, grey waters north beyond the reach of the Mediterranean sun, and you will find a network forged by a different kind of ambition. In the sheltered heads of Scandinavian fjords, the Norse built harbors that were gateways to a world of startling breadth. These were not the geometric, state-planned ports of Rome, but vital, pulsing way stations, the beating commercial hearts of the Viking Age. At places like Hedeby in Denmark and Birka in Sweden, the image of the Viking as only a raider dissolves into a far more complex figure, that of the merchant, the explorer, and the network builder. These sites were meticulously organized. Archaeologists have uncovered long, wooden wharves built with precise carpentry, defining clear docking areas where ships of specific drafts could tie up. Behind them lay grids of workshops where antler was carved into fine combs, amber was polished into beads, and raw iron was forged into tools. Defined market squares hosted traders speaking a dozen languages, from the Frankish tongue of continental Europe to the Slavic dialects of the East. This was a world of tariffs and trade laws, of weights and measures, where commerce was as disciplined as any raid. The engine of this network was a technological marvel, the Viking longship. Its shallow draft allowed it to sail up rivers no other European ship could navigate, while its sturdy, clinker-built hull could withstand the punishing waves of the North Atlantic. This vessel was the ultimate adapter, turning rivers into highways and open oceans into bridges. It enabled a network of staggering range. From these northern harbors, routes spider-webbed outward in all directions. A trader could sail west past Iceland and Greenland to the fog-shrouded coast of Newfoundland, a place they called Vinland, to trade for valuable furs and timber. Another could head east down the river systems of Eastern Europe, all the way to the Caspian Sea and the gates of Baghdad, carrying furs and slaves to exchange for the silver dirhams of the Islamic world that have been found by the thousands in Scandinavian soil. And a third might sail south to Hedeby to trade Norse walrus ivory, a precious substitute for elephant ivory in European workshops, for Frankish swords or Rhenish glass. This was not random wandering. It was a calculated exploitation of ecological zones. The Norse network connected the Arctic, where walrus and polar bear furs were sourced, with the temperate forests and with the silver-rich economies of the caliphates. Their harbors were the crucial transfer points where goods from different climates met. A single dock in Hedeby might see bundles of Siberian squirrel pelts, blocks of Icelandic soapstone, and Arabian silver coins all changing hands on the same day. This required a deep, intuitive understanding of logistics and protection. The choice of harbor location was strategic genius, placing a settlement like Hedeby at the narrow base of a fjord, connected to the open sea by a long, navigable inlet, meant it was easily defensible. Approaching ships could be seen from miles away, and the community was sheltered from the worst ocean storms. The harbor was both a sanctuary and a choke point, controlling access to the hinterlands. These Norseway stations show us that a maritime network is defined by its adaptability. In the absence of a central imperial authority, it was the reliability of the ship and the security of the harbor that created a system of trust and exchange across vast, hostile distances. The silent postholes of their wharves tell a story of connection that reached from the edge of the known world to its very center, proving that even in the age of the axe, the most enduring voyages were those that ended at a market stall. The monsoons that carried ships to India also swept them further down the African coast, to a string of coral-studded cities that sang with a new language of commerce. On the shores of present-day Tanzania, the island of Kilwa rose from the sea, a city built not just for trade but from it. Its secret was geography. A deep, natural harbor protected by a fringe of reefs offered a perfect sanctuary for the massive dhows of the Indian Ocean. From the 9th century onward, this single advantage transformed Kilwa into a linchpin, a gateway controlling the flow of Africa's most sought-after treasures. Ships from Arabia and Persia arrived with fine glazed ceramics, silks, and spices. They departed laden with the wealth of the continent, gold mined from the distant interior kingdom of Great Zimbabwe, gleaming tusks of ivory and aromatic woods. This exchange was the city's lifeblood, and its architecture became a physical testament to that connection. Walking through the ruins today, you are surrounded by coral. Not the rough, natural stone, but coral cut into precise blocks and mortared with lime, a building material born from the sea itself. The grandest structure, the Husuni Kubwa Palace, sprawls across a cliff overlooking the harbor. It was a statement in stone, with over 100 rooms, courtyards, and even a bathing pool, designed to host and impress the foreign merchants who were the source of its owner's power. The palace layout, with its reception halls and segregated living quarters, reflects a blend of African spatial traditions and the needs of an international trading elite. But perhaps the most profound symbol is the Great Mosque of Kilwa, one of the earliest surviving mosques in sub-Saharan Africa. Its rows of precisely aligned coral columns and arched niches speak of an Islamic faith that arrived not by conquest but on the decks of trading vessels. The faith, the architectural styles, the very language of the coast, Swahili, which blends Bantu grammar with a vast vocabulary of Arabic and Persian loanwords, all point to a deep cultural synthesis. Kilwa was not an Arab outpost or an isolated African kingdom. It was something entirely new, a maritime civilization. The city's residents were the product of centuries of intermarriage and cultural exchange between African communities and traders from across the ocean. They developed a cosmopolitan identity uniquely their own, one where a local ruler might bear an Arabic title, commission coins inscribed in his name for use in international trade, and live in a coral palace designed to facilitate commerce with the wider world. This was a melting pot forged by the harbor. The safe anchorage did more than protect ships. It created a space where people could stay, negotiate, and build lives together. The resulting Swahili culture became the enduring lingua franca of the coast, a living monument to the idea that the most powerful ports are those that do not just exchange goods but blend worlds. When the Portuguese first rounded the Cape of Good Hope and saw Kilwa's splendor in the early 16th century, they were astonished by a sophisticated urban civilization they never expected to find. Its silent, coral ruins stand as a powerful counterpoint to old narratives, proving that global networks have always created hybrid, coastal identities, places where the ocean is not a barrier but a home. Across these scattered shores, from the fjords of the north to the coral cities of the south, a silent conversation was taking place in stone and water. The engineers of Lothal, Tyre, and Portus never met, yet they were solving the same three relentless problems posed by the sea. First, protection from its fury. A harbor is useless if waves can smash the ships it is meant to shelter. The universal answer was the breakwater, a wall built out into the sea to create a calm pool behind it. But the methods reveal a spreading genius. The Romans at Portus constructed their massive breakwater using pili, enormous hollow wooden caissons that were floated into position, filled with a special hydraulic concrete, and sunk to form permanent, immovable foundations in the deep water. Centuries earlier and a sea away, the Phoenicians of Tyre used a similar secret, a concrete that could cure underwater, allowing them to build their artificial island harbors directly in the open sea. This was not a coincidence, it was technological kinship. The second, more insidious enemy was silt. Rivers constantly carry sediment to the coast, threatening to choke a harbor into a muddy field. Ancient engineers fought back with clever hydrology. At Lothal, the lock gate system managed tidal flow to scour the basin. At Portus, the entire hexagonal inner harbor was connected by canals to ensure constant water circulation. But perhaps the most elegant solution was the flushing channel. Engineers would design a secondary water channel that could be opened at high tide, directing a powerful surge of clean seawater through the dock areas to sweep accumulated silt back out to sea. This was preventative medicine for a port, a design feature that required a deep understanding of local tidal patterns and water dynamics. The third problem was pure logistics, the ballet of loading and unloading. A ship's time in port was money lost, so efficiency was paramount. This led to the universal feature of the straight quay, a long, sturdy wharf built parallel to the shore, providing maximum linear docking space. Beside these quays arose the unmistakable silhouette of the warehouse complex, the Horia of Rome or the storage galleries of Wadi Al-Jaf. Their design was standardized for reason, with raised floors to keep goods dry and secure, and wide doors aligned with the docks for swift transfer. At Commos, the Minoans took it a step further with their sloped ship sheds, integrating maintenance into the docking process itself. Every one of these features, from the breakwater to the warehouse, speaks of a focus on reducing friction, on turning the chaotic interface of land and sea into a smooth, predictable machine. This convergence of solutions across 3,000 years and thousands of miles is where the story deepens. When we see the same sophisticated concrete in Phoenicia and later in Rome, or the same concept of a tidal dock in the Indus Valley and later elsewhere, it points to something far more significant than independent invention. It points to a shared blueprint traveling on the currents. The most likely carrier of this knowledge was the network itself. A Greek architect might have marveled at the harbors of Egypt while trading for grain. A Roman engineer overseeing the port at Caesarea may have employed techniques learned from captured Phoenician craftsmen. The maritime network did not just move spices and silk, it moved ideas. A better way to bind stones underwater, a more efficient warehouse layout, a method for calculating tidal flow. These were non-perishable goods of immense value. This circulating pool of technological innovation suggests that the ancient maritime world was, in a very real sense, a collaborative project. A sailor did not just work for his king or his merchant house, he was also a courier for the collective ingenuity of his age, carrying the next piece of the blueprint to a waiting shore. But stone and water were only half the story. A silent harbor, no matter how perfectly engineered, is just a sculpture. The true magic, the lifeblood that animated these global networks, flowed from something far more complex and human. Behind every ton of grain unloaded at Portus, every bale of pepper traded at Muziris, was an invisible web of agreements, relationships, and rules. This was the social and economic infrastructure, the operating system that made the physical hardware of the harbor actually work. Picture the waterfront not as a static postcard, but as a living, pulsing organism. At dawn, the dock foreman blows a whistle, and teams of laborers, organized into guilds, begin the precise ballet of unloading a ship. They are not random day laborers, but skilled specialists who know how to handle fragile amphorae, heavy sacks of grain, and precious logs of timber without loss. Nearby, a customs official inspects a cargo manifest, checking seals and calculating tariffs based on a standardized code. In a shaded portico, a merchant from Alexandria argues gently with a banker from Tyre over a letter of credit, a piece of papyrus that promises payment in another port for another shipment months in the future. This scene of organized chaos was only possible because of shared rules. Across the Mediterranean for centuries, mariners and merchants operated under a common understanding known as the Rhodian Sea Law. This was not a single book handed down by a king, but a living body of customary practice, a collection of solutions to common problems. What happens if a captain must jettison cargo in a storm to save the ship? The Rhodian law outlined the principle of general average, where all merchants whose goods were saved would share proportionally in the cost of what was lost. This spread the risk of the sea, transforming a potential ruinous conflict into a manageable, shared business expense. It created a baseline of predictability. A merchant in Ostia could charter a ship owned by a Greek captain, crewed by Egyptians, to carry his wine to Carthage, and they all had a rough common understanding of their rights and responsibilities. This legal framework was the glue, but trust between strangers separated by months of travel required more than just law. It required financial innovation. How could a merchant in Rome pay for spices that were still growing on a vine in India? The answer was the bill of exchange and the warehouse receipt. A Roman importer could deposit gold with a banking house in the city. That house would issue a letter of credit to its agent in Alexandria. The Alexandrian agent, upon seeing the correct seals and signatures, would provide funds to the ship's captain for his journey east. Upon reaching Muziris, the captain could use those funds, backed by the distant Roman gold, to purchase his pepper. Meanwhile, the Indian merchant, upon delivering his pepper to the warehouse in Muziris, would receive a clay token or a papyrus receipt. That receipt was proof of ownership, a title deed for a pile of pepper sitting in a storeroom. He could then sell that receipt to another local trader, or hold it until the next fleet arrived. The physical pepper never had to move until its final buyer was ready to ship it. This system decoupled the movement of goods from the movement of money, accelerating commerce to a speed the physical world could never match. These financial tools were the nervous system of the network, carrying signals of trust and value faster than any ship could sail. Above it all thrummed the constant work of diplomacy. Treaties between kings and city-states guaranteed safe passage for each other's merchants, set tariff rates, and provided for the appointment of consuls who could adjudicate disputes in foreign ports. A Phoenician merchant in the Piraeus, the port of Athens, knew he could seek help from a fellow Phoenician appointed as a community representative. This socio-economic layer turned the dangerous frontier of the sea into a regulated commercial space. The harbor, therefore, was a social technology. Its greatest invention was not the breakwater, but the protocol. It was a space where human ingenuity crafted systems to overcome distance, difference, and deep-seated fear. When an Egyptian sailor, a Greek merchant, and a Levantine banker could stand on a dock under a shared set of rules, with a financial instrument they all accepted, they were doing something more profound than trading goods. They were weaving a fragile, resilient web of mutual dependency across the dark, uncertain sea. The protocols of the port were vital, but they were useless without the knowledge to find the next harbor over the horizon. This was the network's true lifeblood, an intangible library of the sea written in the memory of sailors. Ancient mariners navigated the world's oceans without satellites, without magnetic compasses for much of history, and often without any maps as we know them. They relied instead on a profound, accumulated wisdom, a living software of environmental cues passed from master to apprentice across generations. In the vast Pacific, Polynesian voyagers performed feats of navigation that still stagger modern minds. They memorized the precise rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, creating a celestial compass in their minds, but their knowledge went far beyond the night sky. They learned to read the subtle patterns of ocean swells, feeling how they refracted around unseen islands hundreds of miles away through the rhythm of the canoe beneath them. They watched the flight paths of specific seabirds at dusk, knowing certain species would always fly toward land. They observed the color of clouds and the taste of the air. This was not superstition, it was rigorous empirical science, tested and refined over countless voyages. It allowed them to settle islands scattered across an ocean larger than all the Earth's landmasses combined, a deliberate expansion guided by deep environmental intelligence. Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, a different form of knowledge preservation emerged, the periplus. These were practical sailing guides, often written on scrolls, that listed ports in order, the distances between them, landmarks to watch for, sources of fresh water, and safe anchorages. One might read, after 2 days' sail east from Rhodes, watch for the White Cliffs, then turn into the bay where a river meets the sea. Good water, but beware of the submerged rock on the western side. This was actionable, life-saving data. The periplus turned a coastline from a terrifying mystery into a sequence of known, named waypoints. It democratized navigation, allowing a broader community of merchants to undertake voyages that were once the domain of only the most experienced captains. In the Indian Ocean, the entire rhythm of commerce was dictated by a grand, predictable meteorological clock, the monsoon. Traders did not merely endure these seasonal winds, they mastered their schedule. They knew that the southwest monsoon would begin to blow steadily toward India around April. They would gather their goods and their courage, set sail from Arabia or East Africa, and ride these winds directly to the Malabar coast. They would then wait, trading and negotiating, for the winds to reverse in the autumn. The northeast monsoon would then carry them, laden with pepper and gems, back home as reliably as a train on a track. This created a cyclical, almost ritualistic pattern to global trade. Ships from distant ports would converge on harbors like Muziris within the same few weeks each year, transforming them into annual international festivals of exchange. This knowledge of the monsoon was not just weather lore, it was the central economic calendar for half the world. This navigational wisdom was a community's most prized possession, guarded closely. A master navigator in Polynesia held a status akin to a priest or a noble. In the Mediterranean, a detailed periplus for a profitable route was a trade secret as valuable as the cargo itself. This knowledge was often kept oral, not out of primitiveness but for security and to maintain the prestige of the guilds and families who possessed it. Its transmission was a sacred trust taught through stories, chants, and direct experience on the water. A young sailor learned by doing, by feeling the current shift, by squinting at the horizon at dusk, by listening to the older men debate the meaning of a cloud formation. This ensured the network's persistence, even if a harbor fell into ruin or a kingdom collapsed. As long as a community of sailors remembered the star paths, the wind patterns, and the landmarks, the connection could one day be revived. The ocean highway existed first and foremost as a mental map, a collective memory of the waves that outlasted empires and built the world we know. A ship's hold was a floating archive of human desire. Every amphora, every sack, every carefully wrapped bundle carried a story far richer than its material value. The humble clay amphora, found by the thousands in harbors from Rome to India, is a perfect example. Its shape tells an engineer's tale of stacking efficiency and liquid transport, but its residue whispers of social ritual. Chemical analysis reveals traces of wine from Campanian vineyards, olive oil from Tunisian groves, and fermented fish sauce from Spanish coasts. These were not mere sustenance. They were the essential ingredients for living in a Roman manner, whether in a legionary fort on the Rhine or a merchant's villa in Alexandria. Where these amphorae appear, we can trace the spread of a specific palate, a cultural package that defined civilization around the Mediterranean basin. It was a taste of home, shipped across the world to maintain identity in distant lands, but the flow of taste was never one way. In the soil of a Swahili coastal town like Kilwa, you might find a shard of celadon porcelain, its cool jade green glaze unmistakably Chinese. This fragment did not arrive alone. It came with an entire aesthetic, a preference for a certain thinness, a specific color, a delicate artistry that local potters began to imitate and adapt. The cargo here was not just a dish, but an idea of beauty, traveling 8,000 miles to inspire new artistic traditions on another continent. Similarly, the discovery of Roman gold coins in southern India speaks volumes. They are often found pierced or cut, not spent as currency in a Roman sense, but treasured as bullion or worn as jewelry. This tells us that while the Roman monetary system stopped at the ports, the intrinsic value of their gold and the authority of the emperor's face stamped upon it carried deep into the Indian hinterlands, becoming a raw material for local systems of value and display. Yet for every precious silk roll or ivory tusk, there were mountains of mundane, essential cargo that revealed the gritty reality of ancient power. The harbors of the Roman Empire groaned under the weight of bulk commodities. Enormous grain freighters, the supertankers of their day, sailed from Egypt and North Africa to Portus. This was not a trade in luxuries, but a logistical operation for survival, the annona that fed 1 million people in Rome and kept the peace. Likewise, the massive cedar logs cut from the forests of Lebanon and floated to Tyre were not for decorative carving alone. This strong, straight, aromatic timber was the backbone of temple roofs, palace beams, and most importantly, the hulls of the very ships that sustained the network. The movement of quarried stone is equally telling. Granite columns from Egypt, marble blocks from Anatolia, and limestone from Tuscany were shipped across the Mediterranean to build the iconic monuments of empires. This was trade on a geological scale, the literal foundation of imperial identity being hauled across the waves. Each of these cargo items, from a peppercorn to a pillar, is a single data point in a vast ancient spreadsheet. By mapping their find spots and tracing their chemical signatures back to their source, archaeologists do more than plot routes on a map. They reconstruct a world of priorities. A sudden spike in Egyptian grain shipments to a port in the Aegean might correlate with a famine recorded in a historical text. A decline in the presence of fine Athenian pottery in a Black Sea port could signal a political rupture or a shift in commercial alliances. The choice to transport something as heavy and fragile as marble over such distances reveals an economic calculation where the symbolic value of the material outweighed its staggering transport cost. These material flows let us see what societies could not do without, what they aspired to, and who they relied upon to provide it. The network's true cargo was meaning itself, and every harbor was an inbox overflowing with messages about hunger, faith, power, and beauty, each waiting to be unpacked by a future generation. The same sea lanes that carried spices and silk also carried profound human costs. For all its connective brilliance, the ancient maritime network possessed a darker duality, amplifying not only cooperation but also exploitation and conflict. The very predictability that made trade possible also created predictable targets. Along the bustling corridors of the Mediterranean, Especially off the rugged coast of Cilicia in modern-day Turkey, piracy flourished as a shadow economy. Roman sources from the late Republic are filled with frustrated complaints about these seaborne raiders who could strangle the grain supply to Rome itself, demonstrating how a network's vulnerability could become a weapon. Pirates were not merely lawless bandits, they were often a symptom of political instability, communities displaced by war or economic hardship who turned the sea's anonymity into an opportunity. Their existence forced states to invest heavily in naval patrols and convoy systems, a costly security overhead that was baked into the price of every shipped amphora. This darker trade extended far beyond theft to the trafficking of people. Slavery was a deeply embedded commodity in both the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean networks. Ports like Delos in the Aegean were infamous as massive slave markets, where individuals captured in war or seized by pirates could be sold by the thousands. In the Indian Ocean, African ports like Adulis were not only gateways for ivory and gold, but also points of departure for individuals caught in networks of servitude destined for markets in Arabia, Persia, and beyond. The harbor, in these instances, was not a gateway to opportunity but a site of profound loss and coercion, transforming human lives into cargo to be logged, taxed, and transported. This grim facet reminds us that the efficiency of these networks could be applied to morally devastating ends, serving the demands of affluent societies with a chilling, logistical precision. Control of these vital nodes was so crucial it regularly sparked outright warfare. Perhaps no conflict illustrates this better than the Roman Republic's determined siege and final destruction of Carthage. This was not merely a clash of empires, it was a battle for the mastery of the Western Mediterranean's premier harbors. Carthage's circular military port was a masterpiece of naval engineering, and its commercial docks were the heart of a trading empire that rivaled Rome's. The Romans understood that to secure their own ascendancy, they had to eliminate not just the Carthaginian army, but its capacity to connect trade and project power by sea. The utter razing of the city and the sowing of its fields with salt was a symbolic act, but the real victory was the permanent seizure of its maritime infrastructure and trade routes. From that point forward, Rome controlled the node and thus controlled the network. To acknowledge this complexity is not to diminish the network's achievements, but to understand them fully. The sea was a neutral force. It carried hows of scholars and slave ships with equal indifference. The same harbor that welcomed a philosopher bearing new ideas could later dock a vessel press ganging the unwilling. The network was a double-edged sword, a powerful tool that could enrich and enlighten cultures through exchange, or lead to their subjugation through control of critical ports. Its legacy is therefore deeply ambiguous, a tapestry woven from threads of brilliant innovation and profound human suffering. The silent stones of a dockyard hold both stories, reminding us that connection itself is never inherently virtuous, only powerful. What we build upon that connection defines everything. The network's power was always matched by the power of the planet. For every harbor built by human ingenuity, its ultimate fate was written in the soil, the sea, and the sky. These ports were not just economic hubs, they were environmental experiments, their survival a delicate balance with forces far beyond any king's command. Take the magnificent city of Ephesus, once a glittering jewel on the coast of Anatolia. Its wealth flowed through a bustling harbor that connected it to the entire Mediterranean. Yet today, the ruins of Ephesus sit kilometers inland, stranded in a silent field. The culprit was not an invading army, but the slow, patient work of a river. The Cayster River, flowing through the fertile hinterlands, carried immense loads of silt down to the coast. Year after year, decade after decade, this sediment settled in the harbor basin and along the approach channels. Despite repeated dredging by Roman engineers, the sea gradually retreated. What was once a deep water anchorage for merchant galleys became a shallow lagoon, then a malarial marsh, and finally dry land. The harbor literally choked on the prosperity of its own hinterland. The city's lifeline was severed not with a sword, but with a whisper of silt, forcing its slow, inevitable decline as the maritime world moved on to deeper ports. This was a slow-motion catastrophe, a reminder that the greatest threat to a network could be a process as ordinary as erosion. Other disasters arrived without warning. In Alexandria, the legendary metropolis founded by Alexander the Great, the eastern harbor holds a secret beneath its modern waterfront. Archaeological surveys have revealed a submerged landscape of toppled columns, statues, and blocks lying in chaotic heaps on the seafloor. The leading theory points to a sudden, violent event, likely a powerful earthquake and the tsunami that followed. Imagine the scene, the ground shuddering, the great lighthouse of Pharaoh swaying, and then a wall of water surging into the harbor, smashing ships against the quays and dragging entire sections of the magnificent royal quarter into the depths. In an instant, a century of accumulated infrastructure and wealth could have been lost. While the city recovered, such events reshaped the practical geography of power, redirecting trade and repair resources in their aftermath. They underscore a humbling truth that for all their concrete and stone, these engineering marvels existed at the mercy of the Earth's restless crust. Yet the relationship was not solely destructive. Long periods of climatic stability were the silent enablers of the entire network. The relatively warm, predictable weather patterns of the Roman climatic optimum, for instance, coincided with the empire's greatest expansion of trade. Calmer seas and reliable growing seasons meant more consistent harvests to feed port cities, more predictable sailing windows, and fewer storms to devastate fleets. This environmental peace dividend allowed for the planning of longer voyages and the establishment of permanent settlements in distant lands. The network could stretch its threads farther when the climate was a partner, not an adversary. To read this deeper history, scientists now look not in scrolls but in mud. By extracting core samples from the sediments beneath ancient harbors, they can read a detailed environmental diary. A layer of fine silt tells of river flooding. A sudden deposit of coarse sand and shell fragments might record a tsunami. Pollen grains preserved in the muck reveal what plants grew nearby, painting a picture of deforestation or agricultural change. The very presence of a harbor structure now submerged several meters underwater is a direct measurement of ancient sea level. Each core is a timeline, showing the moment a harbor was vibrant and deep, the moment it began to fill, and the final moment it was abandoned. This scientific perspective transforms our understanding. The ancient maritime network was never a static, human-made diagram on a map. It was a living, breathing, and often fragile negotiation. It was a dynamic dance between the ambition of engineers and the patience of rivers, between the wealth of merchants and the fury of tectonic plates. The harbors were the points where this dance was most visible, where human history and planetary history met at the water's edge, each leaving its mark on the other. The silent stories of silt and stone do not speak for themselves. They require translation, a modern form of deciphering that turns ambiguous ruins into coherent narratives. So how do we truly know the depth of Lothal's dock or the precise purpose of a Roman warehouse? The answer lies in an expanding archaeological toolkit, a collection of technologies that act as new senses, allowing us to perceive a past that has long since slipped beneath the waves or been buried under centuries of earth. Think of it as scientific detective work on a planetary scale. Often, the first clue comes not from a dramatic excavation, but from a slender cylinder of mud. Archaeologists use core drilling, pushing long tubes deep into the sediment of a dried-up harbor basin or a coastal plain. When extracted, these cores present a striped timeline of history. By analyzing the layers, scientists can read the environmental diary we mentioned earlier. Tiny, ancient pollen grains trapped in the mud tell us what plants grew nearby, painting a picture of a lush landscape or a deforested one. Charred seeds can pinpoint the moment of a fire. A sudden shift from clean sand to thick, organic silt might mark the exact year a harbor began to choke and fail. This method allows us to reconstruct the ancient setting, to see the world as the harbor builders saw it before a single stone is uncovered. But what about structures completely lost to the sea? Here, technology lets us map ghosts. Side-scan sonar is deployed from research vessels, sending sound pulses fanning out across the seabed. The returning echoes create detailed, photograph-like images of the ocean floor, revealing the outlines of submerged breakwaters, the skeletons of sunken ships, or the geometric patterns of forgotten quays, all without disturbing a single grain of sand. Complementing this is magnetometry, which measures tiny variations in the Earth's magnetic field. Buried or submerged structures, especially those made of fired brick or volcanic stone, create distinct magnetic anomalies. Towed behind a boat like a high-tech fish, a magnetometer can chart the invisible footprint of an entire harbor complex lying beneath layers of sediment, guiding divers directly to the most promising spots. When wooden remains are found, whether a ship's hull or a wharf piling, another precise clock is consulted. Dendrochronology, or tree ring dating, is a marvel of natural record-keeping. Each year, a tree adds a new growth ring. Wide rings indicate good growing seasons, narrow rings indicate drought or hardship. Scientists have compiled master chronologies for certain tree species, sequences that stretch back thousands of years. By matching the pattern of rings from an ancient timber to this master sequence, they can often determine the exact year the tree was cut down. This gives us not just a rough century, but a specific date for construction, allowing us to tie a harbor's expansion to the reign of a specific pharaoh or a known period of economic boom. The most iconic image, of course, is that of the underwater archaeologist, suspended in the blue silence, carefully brushing sand from an ancient amphora. This meticulous excavation is the final, crucial step, but it is a world away from treasure hunting. Working against time, depth, and currents, archaeologists map every artifact in three-dimensional space, recording the precise relationship between a broken anchor, a scattered cargo of pottery, and the ship's timbers itself. This context is everything. A coin found nestled between deck planks gives a date for the ship's final voyage. The type of stone used for ballast can reveal its last port of call. Each fragment is a word, and its position in the sentence of the site is what allows the full story to be read. No single method holds the entire truth. Like using sight, touch, and hearing to understand an object in a dark room, these tools must be combined. A sonar map reveals a shape, a core sample explains why it was abandoned, and dendrochronology dates its construction. This is where true interdisciplinary magic happens. Historians decipher ancient texts that mention the port's name. Geologists analyze the source of its building stones. Marine biologists identify species in shell middens that tell us about the harbor's water quality. Each specialist brings a piece of the puzzle. The collaborative result transforms a vague notion of an old port into a vivid narrative of its life, its purpose, and its eventual silence. This modern toolkit does not just discover lost places, it resurrects the intricate connections they once fostered, letting us listen, at last, to the conversations that built the world. Two harbors separated by over 2,000 years and a continent bookend the story of ancient connection. In the Indus Valley, Lothal's tidal dock was a masterful adaptation to its environment, a clever lock gate harnessing the moon's rhythm to serve a vibrant city-state. Its genius was in its elegant efficiency, a precise solution for managing the exchange of carnelian beads and Mesopotamian seals within a regional web of commerce. The scale was human, the administration likely handled by merchant guilds or local rulers, and its success was measured in the prosperity of a single, brilliant urban center. Now shift your gaze to the mouth of the Tiber. Portus was not an adaptation, it was an imposition. Its colossal hexagonal basin and artificial breakwaters were a declaration of imperial will, literally reshaping geography to serve a single, overwhelming purpose: the systemic ingestion of an empire's resources. Here, efficiency was measured in millions of measures of grain, and the administration was a vast, impersonal bureaucracy reporting directly to the emperor. The contrast could not be starker, from local ingenuity to monolithic state planning, yet stand at the edge of their ruins and a profound commonality emerges. Both structures in their own eras solved the same three eternal problems. First, they created calm water. Lothal did it with a gate that trapped the high tide, Portus with a man-made island and a lighthouse. Second, they fought silt. Lothal's lock system allowed for scouring, while Portus used circulating canals. Third, and most importantly, they orchestrated the transfer. At Lothal, goods moved from river boats to sea-going vessels within a protected basin. At Portus, grain was shifted from deep-sea freighters to river barges on a geometric quay. The core engineering principle, the fundamental need to create a secure, efficient interface between land and sea transport, remained utterly unchanged. This is the enduring heartbeat beneath the march of empires. What changed was not the what, but the why and the who. Lothal's purpose was commercial prosperity for its own society, a node in a decentralized network of peers. Portus's purpose was political control and stability for Rome, the central processor in a hierarchical, extractive system. The evolution from one to the other traces the journey of the maritime network itself, from a web of interconnected trading partners to an arm of imperial administration. It shows us that the technology of connection is neutral, a tool that can serve the ambition of a merchant city or the appetite of a global empire. The silent, geometric perfection of Portus and the clever, tidal embrace of Lothal are two answers to the same ancient question, proving that while the scale of human dreams expanded beyond imagination, the need to safely meet the sea remained the one constant, the first and final lesson written in every stone of every forgotten dock. The echo of those ancient quays is not a distant memory, but a blueprint still in use. Look at the sprawling, geometric landscape of a modern container port, a place of staggering scale where colossal cranes move identical metal boxes with robotic precision. This scene of 21st century logistics shares a direct lineage with the docks of Tyre and Portus. The standardized shipping container, the very unit of modern global trade, is the spiritual successor to the Roman amphora. Each was designed to a universal specification, stack efficiently on ship, cart, and in warehouse, and be handled by standardized equipment. The amphora moved wine, the container moves electronics, but the principle of frictionless transfer is millennia old. Even the layout is a familiar echo. Modern ports are divided into specialized terminals, one for automobiles, another for refrigerated goods, a third for bulk grain. This is not a new idea. At ancient Tyre, there were almost certainly dedicated quays for cedar logs, for jars of purple dye, for ingots of copper. The ancient harbor master understood that segregating cargo by type sped the entire system, minimizing confusion and maximizing turnover, a lesson relearned in every efficient port since. The geopolitics of these choke points has also endured, its stakes magnified by the scale of modern commerce. The ancient world understood that controlling a harbor like Tyre meant controlling the wealth of a region. Today, that logic has simply expanded to the narrow sea lanes that serve as global harbors. The Strait of Hormuz, a pinched corridor through which a substantial portion of the world's oil must pass, is the modern equivalent of the Phoenician bottleneck. The Strait of Malacca, the crucial artery linking the Indian and Pacific Oceans, holds the same strategic importance as the entrance to the Red Sea did for Egyptian and Roman traders. Nations project naval power to secure these passages not for territorial conquest, but for the same reason Rome besieged Carthage, to guarantee the unimpeded flow of resources upon which their economies and stability depend. The players and technologies have changed, but the fundamental game of controlling the node to command the network remains unchanged. This long view reframes our entire understanding of globalization. We often speak of our interconnected world as a revolutionary break, a product of jet engines, fiber optic cables, and digital finance, but these are merely new tools accelerating an ancient process. The deep roots of globalization are not in Silicon Valley or Wall Street, but in the tidal dock of Lothal and the hexagonal basin of Portus. What we call globalization is not a sudden modern phenomenon. It is the latest, fastest chapter in a story that began when the first coastal community looked at a log floating on the water and saw not just timber, but a vessel. It is a story of incremental innovation, where each generation inherited and improved upon the harbor designs, legal frameworks, and navigational wisdom of the one before. The network has never been erased, only upgraded. From the monsoon-driven rhythms of the Indian Ocean to the algorithmic routing of container ships, the purpose has always been the same: to overcome distance, to manage risk, and to fulfill desire. When we walk through the ruins of these places today, we are not looking at dead ends. We are visiting the early prototypes, the version 1.0 of a system that now envelops the planet. The silence of a place like Muziris or Archaeology is not a story of failure but of iteration. Their functions, their connections, their very reason for being were absorbed, adapted, and scaled up into the world we inhabit. The ancient maritime network built the first layer of a shared human story, written in the movement of goods, ideas, and people across the blue vastness. Its legacy is the undeniable truth that no civilization, however mighty, has ever truly been an island. Our world was built by those who dared to look beyond the horizon, and its future will be shaped by those who remember the long, deep currents of connection that brought us here. The true scale of the ancient maritime world is a story still being written, its final chapters hidden beneath waves and sediment. For every connection we can trace with Roman coins or Phoenician concrete, there exists a tantalizing gap in the map, a whisper of a voyage that defies our established timeline. These are not mere footnotes, but profound mysteries that challenge the very narrative of human isolation. Take the silent departure of the Indus Valley cities, including the brilliant port of Lothal. Around 1900 years before the Common Era, this sophisticated civilization, with its standardized weights, planned cities, and advanced docks, entered a period of decline. The harbors were not destroyed by invaders in a dramatic siege, but slowly abandoned. Was it a prolonged drought that shattered the agricultural base supporting these urban centers? Did a major shift in the course of the Indus River or its tributaries render their ports inaccessible, strangling their economic lifeblood? Or was it a more complex unraveling, a perfect storm of environmental change and social transformation? The answer remains buried, a reminder that even the most ingenious networks are vulnerable to the slow, patient pressures of a changing planet. Across the world, another enduring puzzle sits at the opposite ends of the Eurasian landmass. The Roman and Han Chinese empires flourished simultaneously for centuries, each boasting vast maritime trade networks. Roman glass and coins have been found in Vietnam within the sphere of Han influence. Chinese silk was famously worn in Rome, yet did a Roman merchant ever stand on a Han dock, or a Han sailor ever barter in the markets of Alexandria? The goods certainly moved, but likely through long chains of intermediaries, a relay race across the Indian Ocean and overland through Persia. The tantalizing possibility of direct contact persists. Ancient Chinese texts mention a distant land called Dakin, often interpreted as the Roman Empire, describing its people and products with a mix of accuracy and legend. Could a lost vessel, blown off course by a monsoon, have made the monumental journey? The absence of definitive evidence is itself a lesson, highlighting how even the most expansive networks could operate in segments, connected yet indirectly, their greatest achievements sometimes measured in the distances they did not need to cross. Then there are the discoveries that propose connections where conventional history insists there were none. Fragments of pottery in Brazil bearing inscriptions that some researchers suggest resemble Phoenician script. Roman-era amphorae reported in underwater sites off the coast of the Americas. These findings are hotly debated, often dismissed as misidentified natural formations, modern contamination, or outright hoaxes by the academic mainstream. Yet they persist at the fringe, fueled by a simple, compelling question. If the Polynesians could settle islands across the vast Pacific using stellar navigation, reaching South America as some genetic and botanical studies now suggest, could other skilled ancient mariners have also stumbled upon the so-called New World? The possibility, however remote, forces us to confront the audacity of the human spirit. It suggests that the ocean was not a wall, but a doorway, and that wind and current could occasionally deliver a vessel to a shore its crew never intended to find, leaving behind only ambiguous clues for a future generation to argue over. This is the vibrant, uncertain frontier of maritime archaeology. It is a field where a single discovery in a coastal peat bog or a new scan of a seabed can upend decades of scholarly consensus. The recent revelation of vast, centuries-old stone structures and intricate artifacts off the coast of Micronesia, for instance, is dramatically expanding our understanding of the Austronesian seafaring world, proving their voyages were earlier, more frequent, and more technologically sophisticated than previously believed. Each of these open questions is a gift, a reminder that history is not a sealed archive but an ongoing excavation. They invite us to hold our conclusions lightly and to marvel at the resilience and curiosity that propelled humans across the blue unknown. The greatest legacy of these ancient networks may not be the routes they established, but the enduring mystery of how far they truly reached, a mystery that ensures the next wave or the next trowel of Earth could still reveal a connection that rewrites our shared story. This perspective changes everything about the cradle of civilization. For too long, our mental map of history has been colored by the borders of empires, the rise and fall of dynasties etched onto static landmasses. We see Mesopotamia in one box, the Indus Valley in another, Egypt in its own ribbon along the Nile. But this map is an illusion, a snapshot that misses the constant, vital motion between them. The true picture emerges only when we trace the blue lines, the maritime highways that connected these so-called isolated worlds into a single, pulsating system. This is not merely an addition to history, it is a fundamental rewrite of its first principles. The ancient world was not a collection of solitary lanterns glowing in the dark. It was a web of light. The harbor was the socket where each civilization plugged into the grid, drawing power from and contributing to a shared reservoir of knowledge and innovation. Consider something as foundational as the sail. We cannot point to a single inventor or a lone culture that first harnessed the wind. Instead, the technology seems to appear, improve, and spread almost simultaneously across the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, and the Indian Ocean. This is not coincidence, it is the network at work, a design improvement in hull shape, tested on the rough waters of the Aegean, could within a few sailing seasons influence shipbuilders in the Levant, who might adapt it for the monsoon trade, carrying that refined knowledge further east. The Maritime Network acted as a global research and development lab, accelerating innovation through shared challenge and observation. This diffusion extended far beyond hardware to the very ideas that shape human consciousness. Look at the journey of Buddhism. Born in the Ganges plain of India, it traveled not as a conquest but as a passenger. Monks and merchants carried its teachings aboard ships to the bustling ports of Southeast Asia. At a place like Archaeology, these ideas met local spirit beliefs and Hindu concepts arriving on other ships, blending and adapting to create new, hybrid forms like the majestic traditions that would later flourish at Angkor Wat. The same waters that carried Buddhist sutras would centuries later bring Islamic scholars and traders to the Swahili coast, where the call to prayer would eventually echo from coral mosques, its architectural style a fusion of Arabian form and African materials. These faiths did not spread by the sword alone. They sailed on the prevailing winds, finding receptive audiences in port cities accustomed to new ideas. Even the biological fabric of societies was rewoven by this network. The mundane exchange of crops transformed diets and destinies. Bananas, originally from Southeast Asia, were carried across the Indian Ocean to become a staple in Africa. Chickens from South Asia traveled west to Europe. The Roman Empire's dependence on Egyptian wheat is a classic example of how a network could make a metropolis vulnerable to a drought 1,000 miles away. This movement was a double-edged sword, of course. The same ships that carried spices and silk could also carry illness, as crowded port cities became hubs where pathogens from different continents met new populations with no immunity. These unintended consequences remind us that connection has always carried risk alongside reward. This forces a profound reconsideration of human progress. Our textbooks have often been chronicles of conflict, of walls built and armies clashing. But what if cooperation and exchange were the quieter, deeper engines of development? The consistent evidence from these harbors suggests they were. A Mesopotamian merchant in Lothal was not a conqueror, he was a partner. The Minoan trader in Commos was not imposing culture, he was engaging in a dialogue of aesthetics. The entire system relied on a bedrock of mutual interest, on protocols for fair dealing, and on the fragile, essential currency of trust between strangers. This does not erase the reality of ancient warfare or exploitation, but it layers it with a more complex, more hopeful truth. Human societies have always been drawn to connection. They invested staggering resources to build ports not just to take, but to trade, to learn, to see what was over the horizon. By adopting this networked lens, the origins of our global society snap into a much deeper, clearer focus. The roots do not lie in the 15th century with Columbus or Zheng He. They are embedded in the tidal calculations of Lothal's engineers 4,000 years ago, in the papyrus logs of the Pharaoh's harbor at Wadi Al-Jaf, in the multilingual bustle of a Phoenician quay. Our world was not suddenly connected by a few brave explorers. It was patiently, incrementally woven together by countless forgotten voyages, each one adding a thread to the vast and resilient web we have inherited. Walking among those ruins or simply studying their photographs can feel like a quiet conversation across time. The worn stones of a Roman quay, the precise cut of a Phoenician breakwater block, these were placed by hands that felt the sun and the sea spray just as we do. The architects who plotted these harbors were driven by a familiar mix of ambition and necessity, by the curiosity to see what lay beyond the known map and the simple human need to provide for their communities. Their tools were simpler, their world far vaster in its unknowns, but the impulse to build, to connect, to solve a problem is utterly recognizable. In their silent achievements, now often visited only by scholars and the wind, there lies a profound testament to a shared trait, our species' relentless ingenuity in the face of immense natural forces. They looked at a treacherous coastline and did not see a barrier. They saw a doorway, and they spent generations learning how to build the hinge. That persistent refusal to be isolated is perhaps their loudest message to us now, echoing long after their languages have faded. In our present moment, defined by instantaneous digital links and virtual networks, the physicality of these ancient ports carries a special weight. Our connections today often feel weightless, abstracted into signals and data packets. We tap a screen and communicate across continents, a miracle so seamless it becomes ordinary. The harbors of Lothal or Portus pull us back to the tangible, visceral effort that true connection once required. They remind us that every global network, no matter how ephemeral it seems, ultimately rests on a foundation of physical things, on cables laid across ocean floors, on satellite constellations in orbit, on the very concrete and steel of our modern ports. The ancient engineers understood this intrinsically. Their entire world was one of material consequence. A storm could shatter a fleet, a silted channel could starve a city. Their legacy challenges us to look at our own world with that same concrete awareness. What are the physical pillars of our digital age, and more importantly, what enduring infrastructures of connection are we building for the centuries to come? Future archaeologists, perhaps studying our era from a perspective we cannot yet imagine, will not sift through amphorae or warehouse receipts. They may analyze the ghost imprints of server farms, the chemical strata of our landfills holding obsolete devices, or the stark lines of abandoned launch facilities. The question their work will answer is one we are writing now. Did we use our unprecedented tools to build bridges or walls? Did we create systems that uplifted and informed, or ones that divided and obscured? The ancient maritime network, for all its complexities and shadows, ultimately wove a tighter human fabric. It forced encounters, however difficult, and facilitated exchanges that slowly built a shared reservoir of knowledge, art, and belief. Our networks today operate at light speed, but does the content they carry always enrich that reservoir, or does it sometimes risk poisoning the well? The silent stones of these harbors offer no simple answers, only a long perspective. They show that interconnection is not a modern invention, but a deep, recurring pattern in human history. Our ancestors invested their greatest skills and resources into maintaining these fragile blue lines across the water. They did so because they understood, on some fundamental level, that their survival and their flourishing were tied to the wider world. As we stand at what feels like another great inflection point, with new horizons in space and cyberspace beckoning, their example is a compass. It points toward the enduring value of building physical and social structures that are robust, equitable, and designed for the long haul. It asks us to consider what silent messages our own constructions will whisper to a future world, long after our names are forgotten, and our current technologies seem as quaint as a clay sailing vessel. What will our legacy of connection say about who we were and what we believed was truly worth building? The final shape of this network was not a star, but a web. To see it clearly, we must erase the modern map in our minds, the one defined by solid nations and firm borders. In its place, picture a vast, dark ocean. Now, light begins to glow at specific points along the coasts. A soft, amber light appears at Lothal, on the northwest coast of India. From it, two luminous threads begin to stretch. One reaches westward across the Arabian Sea to the twin rivers of Mesopotamia. Another reaches eastward, skirting the coastline toward the distant lands of Southeast Asia. These are not just lines, they are pulses of light traveling at the speed of the sailing season. Now, a brilliant blue light ignites on the Levantine coast. This is Tyre. From this single, intense node, threads explode outward like a starburst. Some shoot west across the Mediterranean to Carthage, to Sicily, to the rising power of Rome. Others reach south, tracing the arid coastline of the Red Sea toward the riches of Egypt and the Horn of Africa. Each thread is a known route, a documented journey, a habitual path worn deep by countless keels. Now look further east. On the lush Malabar coast, a vibrant green light glows. This is Muziris. From here, a single, breathtaking arc of light sweeps across the entire width of the Indian Ocean. It does not follow a coastline. It strikes out bravely into open water, a direct line connecting the subcontinent with the ports of Arabia, and beyond them, the Roman world. This arc is the Monsoon Highway, a seasonal beam of connection that appears and disappears with the turning of the winds. When you step back and see all these lights together, the true picture emerges. This is a polycentric system. There is no single capital, no Rome or London that commands all the threads. Instead, multiple powerful hubs, Lothal, Tyre, Muziris, Alexandria, Carthage, each with their own radiating sphere of influence, overlap and interlock. They form a resilient, decentralized web. If one hub falters due to war or a silted harbor, the traffic can find another path, another node to carry the flow. This visualization lets us trace a single, humble peppercorn on its epic journey. It begins as a berry on a vine in the hills of Kerala. A local trader brings it down river to the bustling warehouses of Muziris. There it is packed into a sack with thousands of its kin. A merchant from Alexandria, having sold his cargo of Roman glassware, purchases that sack. His ship waits for the shift in the wind. When the northeast monsoon begins to blow, he sets sail, riding that steady wind across the Indian Ocean to the port of Aden or perhaps Kana on the Arabian coast. The pepper is unloaded, taxed, and stored. It might be sold again to another merchant whose ship is heading up the Red Sea. That ship docks at Berenice or Myos Hormuz, where the sack is transferred to Camelback for a desert crossing to the Nile. On the great river, it is loaded onto a barge destined for Alexandria. In that greatest of Mediterranean ports, the pepper enters yet another market. A Roman wholesaler buys it, loading it onto a massive grain freighter heading for Portus. After arriving at the mouth of the Tyre, the sack is finally transferred to a river barge for the last leg to Rome. There, a spice merchant in the Subura district purchases it, and eventually, a cook in a wealthy patrician's household measures out a few precious grains to season a dish. One peppercorn, one dinner, but behind it lies an entire world in motion, a chain of trust spanning oceans and continents, a relay of hands and languages and ledgers. This was the ancient World Wide Web, a physical network of staggering complexity and beauty, proving that long before digital signals, the human desire for connection was already writing its story in light upon the water. The journey across these waters, from the sun-bleached stones of Lothal to the geometric basin of Portus, has been a voyage through time itself. We have traced the silent blueprints of a world already woven together, not by the internet, but by the patient rhythm of tides and the courage of sails. These ancient dockyards were far more than parking lots for ships. They were the pulsating hearts of a global network, the vital organs of a body of exchange that spanned continents. They moved more than just spices and silk. They moved the very ingredients of civilization, the technologies, the faiths, the artistic styles, and the financial systems that slowly built a shared human story. This is the hidden narrative, one not of isolated kingdoms, but of a deep, enduring impulse to connect. Globalization is not a modern invention. It is an ancient human instinct, a story written in harbor walls and scattered amphorae, driven by a relentless curiosity for what lies beyond the horizon and a fundamental need to exchange. As you go about your day in our hyper-connected world, tapping a screen to communicate across the planet, remember the deep roots of that connection. Remember the engineers who calculated the tides, the merchants who trusted a papyrus letter of credit, and the sailors who navigated by the stars. Their world was built on the same desire that builds ours. If this journey across the ancient seas has sparked your curiosity, there are countless more mysteries waiting. Consider subscribing to join us as we continue to explore the hidden threads of history. And we would love to hear from you. Which of these ancient harbors, from the coral city of Kilwa to the water streets of Archaeology, intrigues you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us keep the conversation, just like the ancient network